Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us, and I appreciate all the presentations that we've heard. I chose this title, I guess, Vertical Farming in Kuwait, a mandatory, not an option, to grab the attention about the food security aspect that we are facing here in Kuwait that was evident during the COVID crisis. So just an introduction, what is vertical hydroponic farming? Basically, we're used to farming in a way where you go through the land itself. We think about it in meters squared instead of meter cubed. The idea is that we enhance the lab environment and we made it more commercial. So instead of using, soil, in this case, the roots of the plant itself is submerged directly into the water. This water, obviously, will have some sort of nutrients, and these nutrients will be supplying the plant with the required nutrients to grow. Then the second thing is that we substitute the usage of the sun and its light spectrum with LED lights at specific light spectrum. Again, we do not use pesticides because, again, this is an upscale lab environment one way or another, and therefore we do not need to fight any pesticides. Scaled up, basically, again, it's a scaled up lab environment. I would just usually like to take a big look on the situation right now in Kuwait and the challenges that we're facing. So again, Kuwait has a harsh environment with regard to design aspect. It's extremely hot in the summer, and we get to 0 degrees Celsius in the winter. We have sandstorm, dry heat, lack of nutrients in our soils, small land, and lack of natural sources of water, except for expensive desalination plants. Again, sometimes we can think about misdirected subsidies and incentives toward farming. A huge percentage of crops are imported, and therefore low food security and national dependency in Kuwait. Again, since the government is one way or another subsidizing water and electricity, therefore there are some huge costs on government when it comes to utilities, like electricity and water. Now, how does vertical farming tackle that, and why is it mandatory? Again, because we're going in a hydroponic upscale lab environment, we reuse 90 to 95% of the water that we're injecting in this plant. So low cost of utilities, low cost of water, and so this, again, goes back to the consumer and the government usage. And then low usage of electricity compared to traditional farming here in Kuwait. Smaller land can yield more production. Again, we're thinking in terms of meters cubed instead of meters squared, so it's all about going in height. Most of the capex to build is available locally, so a lot of manufacturers here in Kuwait can supply a lot of the material that you use to construct these vertical farms. Again, we need to focus on switching the concept from importing crops from outside of Kuwait to traditional farming and to hydroponic vertical farming. And this evidently will reduce the usage of all of these utilities. Just getting into numbers, so we can see how the traditional farming first is not making money for the farmers, and then again, the hydroponic farming is actually a profitable business if someone would like to invest in that part. So this is a quick comparison based on actual data. Labor cost per kg produced in vertical farming is 2.6 kd per kg, while in hydroponic farming it's 0.5 kd. Water, which is quantified in dinar for every 1,000 gallons of water, is 0.01, where in traditional farming it's 0.5 Kuwaiti dinar per kg. And with regard to electricity, it's quite close. However, in hydroponic farming, we use a lot of electricity for HVAC here in Kuwait, and also for LED lights. However, in traditional farming, we still are higher because, again, we use some sort of HVAC systems, we use a lot of pumps, and when we look also at the other aspects that we use, for example, seeds and fertilizers, we're talking about 0.13, which is the nutrient solutions that we're putting in the water to supply for the plants, while it's 0.2 in traditional farming. Depreciation is extremely high in traditional farming for 1 kd per kg produced, while it's 0.6 kd per kg produced. So we're talking about a summation of 4.48 for a leafy crop here in Kuwait in traditional farming. which evidently tells you something, that farmers are not making a profitable business here in Kuwait. It's mostly dependent on subsidies. And again, since it's depending on subsidies, one way or another, we are paying for it in some sort of way because the government has to subsidize it. While in hydroponic vertical farming, it's 1.38 for a specific leafy green. Now, if we take a quick comparison on the government side, how much losses are the government facing when we compare vertical farm to traditional farm? As you know, I'm just going to go through the data below the table. The water cost on the government is 9 KD for 1,000 gallon. On us as a consumer, we only pay 1.25. The other is subsidized. Electrical cost on government is around 33 fils. We only pay 2 to 3 fils. So when you compare the savings that you make with regard to water and electricity, we're talking about a summation of 5.2 dinar for every kilogram the farmer produced on the government, while in vertical farming at 3.6. So that's quite a significant saving, especially looking at the kg produced in this aspect. So what did we do, I guess, from our side in NRG International, is that when we looked at external systems, they were quite complicated. One way or another, vertical hydroponic farming is relatively a new technology. Only 15 years ago, LED lights were more, cost effective in the way that it's being used, especially in vertical hydroponic. So the idea was that a lot of external entities have been putting a lot of automation in the systems, while this might not be applicable to Kuwait environment. At the same time, the temperature challenges is quite different between Europe, the US, versus what we have here in Kuwait. So again, what we did is we decided that we should build some sort of solution here in Kuwait. We made it simpler, with simpler operation, LED light enhancements. So what we did is our optimization exercise was done on all the parts except for the LED lights. We believe that the LED lights play a significant role in the growth of the crops and therefore the profitability of the system. So these are some sort of containers that we decided to build here in Kuwait. We built 4 containers. These containers are 80% of the value invested in them are from Kuwaiti manufacturers. So the NFT or basically the places where we're growing the crops here on the left are made in Kuwait. The container was literally empty. We did all the, with regard to labor, we used local labor with the right supervision, and we made it in a modular package. But again, this is something that was, the prototype, and then we decided to invest heavier in the next solution. A very important point is that we quantify what kind of nutrients are in the crops that we grow. So we've taken these crops. We did basil, Genova basil, and kale winterbore, and we provided them to a lab for testing, which was quite successful. And then at the same time, we provided to a lot of 5-star restaurants here in Kuwait, hotels and niche, restaurants. All were approved, and we were ready to move to the next step. Feasibility study, again, from a feasible standpoint, we are reducing 95%, and from the table that I showed before, it is quite a feasible solution. Now, for future expansions, and this is something that a lot of, governmental and companies are looking to invest in, you go for an insulated warehouse. Containers are not the best solutions. The idea about vertical farming is that you go up. Containers are quite limited with the height that you're using, which is 2.5 meters. So the idea is that you utilize the least amount of area, which we found with an optimization exercise to be 1,250 meters squared, going 7 meters up. Anything above that is obviously better. The estimated project cost is 500,000 KD, and this is a detailed feasibility study. We have a detailed feasibility study, and we're basically now securing the funds for all of those, for these studies. Return on investment, as you see, is quite significant with regard to any comparable farming solution in Kuwait. We're talking about an average of 57% return of investment, a yearly production of 85,000 kilogram per year. You can see that at the beginning of the first year, which is normal because you are commissioning the system, you're expected to have a lack of 10,000 kg in that year. Lesson learned and experience gained, I guess important, there were a lot of models that a lot of local companies have gone through, which is basically going for an LSDK or EPC kind of contracts with external entities. Unfortunately, those external entities do not usually know what kind of temperature aspects and some environmental aspects here in Kuwait. And therefore, there were some challenges in commissioning those systems. So the best model, I guess, is some sort of consortium with the external entities, bringing subject matter experts to Kuwait, and then in one way or another in a collaboration aspect. A lot of optimization exercise, when you look at your CapEx expenses, you're going to be surprised that LED is going to be significantly higher than everything else. Do not optimize on LED. LED are your most important aspect in these systems. They are what gives you the continuous and fast growth of these plants. Optimize on stuff that are not related to growth of the plants directly, such as NFT and the plastic aspect of the system. Saving in manpower was significant. One farmer with basic knowledge can handle the job for 4 containers with plenty of time saving also. We have already used our experience and expanded knowledge in growing other type of crops. So recently, just 2 weeks ago, we were approached by a Japanese restaurant here in Kuwait to develop edible flowers. Edible flowers are quite expensive, for example, and they are usually imported from outside. By the time they are getting here into Kuwait, you see them, in a bad quality, although they are in a good quality at the place of the origin. So we developed that for the client, knowing that, and we have provided those samples to him. Now, he is able now to grow or provide edible flowers done here in Kuwait. We've done some further experiences with some of the farmers here in Kuwait who have cattle. And lastly, keep the operation simple. Yes, you can automate literally everything, but you need to look at your CapEx and how it affects your OpEx. Put in mind that labor here in Kuwait, sometimes at the end of the day, you are competing with imported products. One way or another, you are trying to beat some sort of a number to provide good quality product, at the same time, cost effective for your client. And at the end, I truly believe that Kuwait, if started investing heavily and locally in hydroponic vertical farming, it can establish its destiny of being an oasis in the middle of the desert and a mass producer for the region. Thank you so much.